Most people see potential as a beautiful, dormant power inside of them, a seed waiting for the right moment to bloom. But the truth is far more deceptive. Potential, when left unspent, does not function as a force of transformation. It becomes a narcotic. It intoxicates. It gives you just enough satisfaction to believe you are becoming someone, without requiring you to actually change. Imagine this. You're lying in bed picturing your future self, successful, admired, fulfilled. In that moment, you feel a surge of pride. You haven't taken any real steps, but you've tapped into the high of imagined success. That's what makes potential so dangerous. It provides an emotional reward without requiring movement. It offers hope without discomfort, self-worth without effort. Each time someone tells you, you're so talented or you have so much potential, your brain lights up. You feel seen, validated, even accomplished, though nothing tangible has changed. Over time, you begin to seek that praise the way one might seek another fix. You fantasize about your future so often that the fantasy begins to replace the desire for real action. And worse, your brain starts to learn that imagination is a substitute for transformation. This is where potential becomes a psychological trap. Every time you indulge in the fantasy of your greater self, you get the chemical reward without taking the physical risk. There's no failure in fantasy, no embarrassment, no rejection. In your mind, you are everything you hope to be. And better yet, you're always on the edge of becoming it. That moment of greatness is just one big leap away. And so you wait. You wait for clarity. You wait for courage. You wait for inspiration. You tell yourself, not now, but soon. And while you wait, you rehearse 1,000 versions of the future in your mind, each more exhilarating than the last. But reality remains untouched. You remain exactly where you were, feeling increasingly anxious about the gap between who you are and who you're supposed to be. The longer you stay in this cycle, the more it solidifies. Your mind starts to prefer this safety. It resists discomfort. You might tell yourself you're preparing or waiting for the right time, but what you're really doing is avoiding risk, because spending your potential means confronting the terrifying possibility that it might not be enough, that you might not measure up, that you might fail. So you remain in this space, a psychological limbo, where potential keeps you from movement. It's like staring through the glass at a beautiful life you've imagined but never stepped into. And with each passing day, the fantasy begins to carry more weight than reality. You become someone who is defined not by what you've done, but by what you could have done. You begin to mistake potential for identity. And here lies the cruel irony. The more potential you believe you have, the harder it becomes to act. Because any real attempt might puncture the illusion. What if you try and fall short? What if you discover that the dream is harder than you thought, or worse, that it's not yours at all? These questions haunt you. They freeze you. They convince you that the safest place is inside the idea of who you could be, not the messy world of who you actually are. But this illusion comes at a cost. Slowly, your sense of self begins to erode. You begin to feel like a fraud. You talk about your dreams, your big plans, but deep down you know they're just words. This gap between your imagined future and your lived reality starts to breed shame. You start to feel guilty for all the things you haven't done, ashamed that despite your promise, you remain stuck. And still, the fantasy beckons. It's easier to imagine progress than to face the awkwardness of beginning. At this stage, your mind is fully hooked. You chase the high of potential the way others chase recognition, love, or approval. You crave the feeling of being extraordinary, of being destined, but all of it lives in your imagination. Nothing is tested. Nothing is challenged. Nothing is earned. And when this continues for years, as it often does, you start to question everything. Not just your goals, but your worth. You begin to doubt whether you were ever capable to begin with. You wonder if you've wasted your best years clinging to a fantasy that never came true. That's the tragedy of potential as drug. It starts as inspiration, but ends in paralysis. It whispers, you're meant for more, while keeping you locked in place. So how do you break the spell? How do you escape this cycle of imagined greatness and begin the real work of growth? The answer isn't glamorous. It's not a viral quote or a motivational speech. It's not about believing in your destiny. It's about doing what feels unremarkable. It's about trading the thrill of imagining success for the quiet, often invisible process of earning it. Because the truth is, potential is worthless until it's spent. It has no power unless you give it form. Until then, it's just air, flattering, comfortable, and ultimately suffocating. In the next part, we'll explore how this illusion of potential shapes your identity and creates a prison of perfection, and how believing you're meant for more might be the very reason you're doing less. At first glance, having potential feels like a gift. It suggests that you are destined for something greater, that you possess within you a rare spark waiting to ignite. But beneath that glow lies a subtle trap. The more you believe in your untapped greatness, the more you begin to build your identity around it. This isn't just about ambition. It becomes a way of seeing yourself, of explaining your worth. I'm not there yet, you tell yourself, but I'm meant for something more. And at first, that belief feels empowering. It shields you from mediocrity, helps you endure boring jobs, misunderstood friendships, or environments that don't appreciate you. But over time, this belief becomes a double-edged sword. Because once your identity is wrapped in the idea of being exceptional, anything that challenges that story feels like a threat. Entry-level tasks, visible failure, moments of doubt, they don't just feel inconvenient, they feel like an attack on who you think you are. Instead of being experiences you learn from, they become experiences you avoid. Why risk looking average if you believe you're destined to be extraordinary? This mindset quietly starts to shape your behavior. You avoid projects you might fail at. You hold back from sharing your ideas. You wait for perfect conditions to begin anything meaningful. All the while, you tell yourself you're just being strategic or patient. But in reality, you're protecting the image of your potential, afraid that testing it might prove it's not as special as you thought. The irony is cruel. The higher you hold your self-image, the more fragile it becomes. Every risk carries more weight, every criticism cuts deeper, and every small failure feels personal. Slowly, you begin to live in fear of being exposed as ordinary. You might even hide behind cynicism, mocking others for trying, saying things like, "That's beneath me," or "If I really wanted to, I could do that too." These are defense mechanisms. They guard your fantasy self, the one untouched by effort or error. But they also isolate you. Because by protecting your specialness, you refuse to grow. You stay on the sidelines, dreaming of what you could be, while fearing what you might find if you actually try. The trap gets deeper. The more you fantasize about your future success, the less satisfied you feel with where you are. You become hyper-aware of the gap between your current reality and your imagined potential. That gap becomes a source of quiet shame. You start comparing yourself not to others, but to the version of you that doesn't exist yet. And every day you fail to match that imaginary self, you feel like you're falling behind. This is not ambition. It's a form of psychological self-harm. Because instead of motivating you, the idea of your greatness begins to haunt you. It whispers, "Why aren't you further along? Why haven't you started? What if you never live up to it?" You begin to measure your worth not by what you do, but by what you haven't done yet. The more this identity hardens, the more paralyzed you become. You start to crave validation before you act, needing constant reassurance that you really are exceptional. You might avoid collaboration or feedback because it might puncture your sense of superiority. You might chase short bursts of recognition, likes, compliments, small wins, not for the joy of them, but for the proof that you are who you believe you are. This cycle is exhausting. You begin to oscillate between inflated dreams and crushing doubt. On some days, you're convinced you're meant for greatness. On others, you feel like a fraud. You look for shortcuts, for that one big opportunity that will finally validate your identity without requiring the messy, vulnerable process of growth. And when that opportunity doesn't come, you feel cheated. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right moment, but deep down you know you're avoiding the truth. That potential is not something you are. It's something you do. Unless you act on it, it means nothing. So how do you escape this trap? It begins with humility. You must unhook your worth from your imagined greatness and anchor it to your willingness to try. You must allow yourself to look average, to fail, to start small. You have to accept that growth begins in discomfort, not in fantasy. And more importantly, you must learn to see yourself not as someone who is meant for more, but as someone who is ready to build. The shift is subtle but profound. When you stop asking, "What am I destined for?" and start asking, "What can I create today?" you reclaim your power. You move from imagination to effort, from identity to action. You stop fearing your limits and start discovering them. And in doing so, you stop worshiping your potential and start spending it. Because potential is not a crown to wear, it's a currency to invest. The only way to honor it is to use it, to risk it, to lose it, to translate it into something real. And that begins the moment you let go of who you think you should be and commit to who you are becoming. In part 3, we'll explore one of the most dangerous illusions that keeps people stuck in the fantasy of their potential: the myth of the one big break. We'll unpack why so many intelligent, capable people stay immobilized by waiting for the perfect moment, and how this myth becomes a socially acceptable way to avoid the discomfort of slow, uncertain progress. Stay with me. The illusion is comforting, but breaking it is liberating. One of the most seductive illusions we carry about our potential is the belief in the one big break, that somewhere in the future lies a single transformative event, a perfect opportunity, a spotlight moment that will finally unlock our greatness and validate all the dreams we've carried. It's the idea that your life isn't defined by the small choices you make every day, but by one dramatic turning point. A discovery, a career breakthrough, a relationship, a creative project, that changes everything. This belief is incredibly appealing because it removes pressure from the present. If your life is waiting for a big moment, then what you do today doesn't really matter. You can delay action because your time hasn't come yet. You can dismiss the importance of small steps because they seem insignificant compared to the grand vision in your head. You begin to believe that preparation isn't necessary, that the real task is to wait patiently for destiny to arrive. But here's the truth. This fantasy is not only unrealistic, it is paralyzing. Because most real change, most real success, doesn't come from a single pivot, but from thousands of quiet repetitions. Progress is rarely cinematic. Growth is almost always invisible, awkward, and unglamorous. The myth of the one big break gives you a reason to stay still, and in doing so, it robs you of the very progress you crave. Let's take a closer look at why this myth persists. Culturally, we're surrounded by stories of sudden discovery, the unknown writer who becomes an overnight bestseller, the garage entrepreneur who launches the next tech empire, the singer who goes viral. But these narratives are deceptive. What looks like an overnight success is usually the end result of years of unnoticed work. We see the highlight, not the grind. And by mistaking the highlight for the beginning, we fool ourselves into thinking our own journey should look similar. This belief creates an internal trap. You start to feel that the small, humble actions available to you today aren't worthy of your talent. You think that working an entry-level job or writing for an audience of 5 people is beneath the person you imagine yourself to be. So, you hesitate. You wait. You dream. But the work that needs to be done never gets started. Even worse, the fantasy of a big break becomes an emotional safety net. As long as that breakthrough lies somewhere ahead, you can justify your inaction. You tell yourself, I'm waiting for the right opportunity, or I'll start when I'm ready. But readiness is a myth. There is no magical moment when you suddenly become capable of extraordinary things. Capability is built through practice, not waiting. There is also a deeper psychological reason why we cling to this myth: fear. The fantasy of the big break allows you to preserve the belief in your potential without testing it. As long as your promise remains unspent, it cannot be proven wrong. Taking action, on the other hand, risks failure. It invites vulnerability. It means exposing your work, your dreams, your identity to criticism or indifference. So rather than risk all that, you stay in the dream. You keep your potential safe and unused. This is where the cycle begins. The more you wait for the perfect moment, the harder it becomes to take any action at all. You become paralyzed by expectation. Every day that passes adds more pressure to make it count when the moment finally comes. And that pressure becomes so intense that you end up avoiding the moment altogether. You wait so long that you begin to fear the opportunity itself. Ironically, this makes you more likely to miss real opportunities when they do appear. Because you're waiting for something cinematic, you overlook the small doors that quietly open. You ignore the chance to start something basic, learn something new, or collaborate with someone who could help you grow. The myth of the big break doesn't just stop you from moving. It makes you blind to the movement already happening around you. And this myth is sustained by another illusion, that your future will be determined by a single act of brilliance. But in reality, your future is shaped by how you show up day after day when no one is watching. It is forged in private effort, built through boring repetition, and strengthened through mistakes. The one big break is often nothing more than the final link in a long, invisible chain of preparation. Understanding this changes everything. When you stop believing in the myth, you stop waiting. You stop searching for perfect conditions or ideal timing. Instead, you start doing the real work of change, building the habits, routines, and resilience that allow your potential to take root. You realize that the path to your future is not a stage, but a staircase, climbed one deliberate step at a time. This shift in perspective doesn't mean you let go of ambition. It means you stop postponing your growth in the name of some future moment. You stop outsourcing your fulfillment to a fantasy. And that is the beginning of real power. Because here's the truth. If you want a breakthrough, create it. Don't wait to be discovered. Don't wait to be chosen. Start where you are with what you have and build something that demands to be seen. Your big moment is not a lottery ticket waiting to be drawn. It is the result of small, brave decisions made every single day. And when you look back on your journey, you might find that the real breakthrough wasn't a single event, but the moment you decided to stop waiting and start building. That decision, quiet and uncelebrated, might be the most important one of all. In the next part, we'll explore what happens when the promise of your potential turns from inspiration into anxiety, when the fantasy of greatness begins to haunt rather than help you. Stay with me. At first, potential feels like a blessing, a kind of halo that hovers over your life, glowing with all the things you could be, should be, maybe even were born to be. But over time, this glow can shift. What once inspired you can begin to haunt you. The very dream that once gave you hope can become the standard that silently crushes you. Because the more vividly you imagine your future self, the more disappointed you become in your current one. Every time you picture yourself as accomplished, admired, or extraordinary, you feed a vision that's detached from your present reality. That image in your head becomes sharper, brighter, more intoxicating. And at the same time, your actual self starts to feel blurry, stagnant, not enough. A quiet voice starts whispering, "You should be further along by now. If you were really talented, really capable, wouldn't the results be showing already?" And this is where the fantasy turns on you. You're no longer inspired by your potential. You're oppressed by it. Instead of feeling pulled forward by your dreams, you start to feel dragged down by your failure to live up to them. The distance between who you are and who you believe you should be becomes a measuring stick you use to beat yourself up. It becomes a source of shame, guilt, and paralysis. And the cruel twist? The more potential you think you have, the worse it feels. You don't just feel like you're falling short. You feel like you're betraying some unspoken promise. Like you're wasting something precious. Like you're failing not just yourself, but everyone who believed in you. The praise you once loved now stings. You're so talented. You're going to do something amazing. What used to feel like fuel now sounds like pressure. And here's the part that's even more insidious. This feeling doesn't push you into action. It traps you in self-judgment. You think that if you can just feel bad enough about your lack of progress, maybe that will make you change. But it doesn't. It only deepens the cycle. Guilt becomes your new comfort zone. Shame becomes the soundtrack of your days. You start to live in a constant loop of mental comparison. Past you full of dreams versus current, you full of hesitation. And the more time that passes, the heavier it all feels. The window is closing. You're wasting your chance. Maybe you already missed it. The dream stays alive, but it no longer uplifts. It suffocates. This is where potential becomes psychological torture. And it gets worse when even small wins no longer feel like enough. You finish a project, get a promotion, complete a degree, and instead of celebration, you feel emptier. Because it didn't match the scale of your fantasy. Your mind moves the goalpost. That was just step one. Real success is still far away. No matter what you achieve, the imagined version of you is always bigger. And real life never quite measures up. So what do you do when the dream starts to hurt more than it helps? You have to break the spell. The first step is understanding a hard truth. Potential is not precious. It's not some divine gift that needs to be protected. It's not something to store in a vault and guard with your life. It's just energy, unfocused, unproven, and ultimately worthless until it's spent. And it's meant to be spent. So you have to stop waiting to feel ready. You have to stop imagining the perfect moment where your greatness will reveal itself. That moment doesn't exist. The only way to know what your potential is worth is to use it, to cash it in, to risk losing it. Because if you don't, it will own you. The fantasy will control you, and it will keep you small while pretending to keep you safe. That means starting where you are with your current skills, your current circumstances, your current level of fear. That means making something imperfect, doing something mediocre, stepping into situations where you might not shine. That means allowing yourself to look like a beginner. Because you are. Growth doesn't happen in your imagination. It happens in reality, through effort, through failure, through awkwardness, through repetition. Your dreams will not come to life through fantasizing or waiting. They will only become real through action, even small, messy action. And here's the beautiful irony. Once you start spending your potential, once you start doing instead of dreaming, the pressure begins to ease. The voice of shame gets quieter. The fantasy loses its power. Why? Because you've shifted your identity from someone who could do great things to someone who is doing them, one small step at a time. You no longer need to protect some idealized image. You no longer need to look special. You just need to move forward. And that movement is where confidence is born. Not in the belief that you are destined for greatness, but in the experience of facing life and doing the work anyway. The real danger is not in failing to live up to your potential. The real danger is in never trying. In protecting the fantasy for so long that it becomes your prison. In choosing to be someone with promise instead of becoming someone with progress. And make no mistake, they are not the same thing. The one is safe. The other is brave. The one is praised. The other is tested. The one is admired. The other is real. So if you felt stuck, haunted by a vision of yourself that never seems to materialize, this is your invitation to let that vision go. To stop clinging to your potential like it's proof of your worth. To stop measuring yourself by an image in your mind and start measuring yourself by your actions, by your effort, by your movement through the world. That's how you reclaim your power, not by waiting for your potential to blossom on its own, but by spending it like it was always meant to be spent, boldly, clumsily, imperfectly. That's where the transformation begins, because once you let go of who you're supposed to become, you can finally become who you actually are.